The streets of New York, right around the United Nations headquarters, recently transformed into a stage for one of the most powerful displays of public dissent we've seen in a while. Thousands of people, from all walks of life, converged with a single thunderous demand: the arrest of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and accountability for what they are calling a genocide in Gaza. This wasn't just another protest. It was a carefully orchestrated, deeply felt cry for justice, echoing a growing international outrage against the devastating war and humanitarian catastrophe unfolding in the Gaza Strip. The sheer scale of this demonstration was breathtaking. Imagine diverse groups, different faiths, and opposing political backgrounds, all marching side by side. It speaks volumes about how deeply this issue resonates across communities. The air was thick with chants, banners flew high, and impassioned speeches weren't just random expressions of anger. They were pointed, coordinated calls for global institutions like the UN to take real, concrete legal action. They were framing Netanyahu as the person responsible for the widespread civilian death and destruction in Gaza. From a performance perspective, the organization and reach of this protest were truly remarkable. Activists masterfully used social media, community networks, and diaspora connections to mobilize thousands in an incredibly short amount of time. Think about the logistics involved in bringing such a massive crowd to the heart of New York, right during the UN General Assembly. This was a masterclass in political strategy. The timing was no accident. It was deliberately planned to coincide with Netanyahu's visit to the UN, a move designed to crank up the pressure on world leaders gathered inside. This created a powerful dynamic where the protesters weren't just shouting into the void. They were directly confronting the global stage, where diplomatic narratives are written and rewritten. The energy was electric, with coordinated chants and even symbolic acts like mock trials and street theater, all adding a performative layer that translated complex political accusations into vivid, emotional messages that the public could immediately grasp and feel. Design played a huge role in the protest's impact. You could unmiss the massive banners that read "Arrest Netanyahu" or the graphic posters depicting the sheer devastation in Gaza. The visual communication was striking and unavoidable. Many demonstrators wore keffiyehs and carried Palestinian flags, beautifully blending cultural symbolism with a message of political resistance. Even the march route itself, circling the UN complex, was a live visual spectacle designed for the cameras, ensuring that media coverage would capture not just the numbers but the raw passion and creativity of the demonstrators. They used symbolic props like empty shoes to represent the children who have been lost, blood-red paint on placards, and even coffins draped in Palestinian colors. This gave the protest a theatrical edge, turning cold, abstract statistics into heart-wrenching human stories. This visual strategy was absolutely essential for cutting through the noise of a packed news cycle, competing for attention with the speeches of world leaders happening just inside the UN walls. What truly makes this movement unique is its ability to connect grassroots activism with the high-stakes world of global political discourse. Protests happen all over the world, but this one, right at the doorstep of the UN, carried immense symbolic weight. It directly intersected with international law, diplomacy, and global governance. By demanding the arrest of a sitting prime minister on accusations of genocide, the protesters elevated their message far beyond a simple political disagreement. They moved it into the realm of war crimes, international justice, and accountability under frameworks like the Geneva Conventions. This legal and moral framing gave their cause a gravity that you don't see in ordinary protests. This wasn't just a plea for peace. It was a demand for prosecution, a bold and rare call aimed squarely at the highest echelons of power. This march also reflected a significant shift in global public opinion. While Western governments have historically provided strong political support for Israel, the scenes at the UN showed a different story brewing on the streets. Public sentiment in many countries is moving in the opposite direction. We saw Jewish groups, human rights organizations, student collectives, and various community groups marching together, forming an unusual but powerful coalition that blurs traditional political lines. This unity is a core strength of the movement. It signals that opposition to the war in Gaza is no longer confined to the usual activist circles. It's spilling over into the mainstream public consciousness. When you bring together people from such diverse backgrounds under a single, clear demand, it lends the movement a credibility that makes it incredibly difficult for critics to dismiss it as fringe or ideologically narrow. Technically, the protest was a showcase of the modern activist's toolkit. Organizers leaned heavily on live streaming platforms, drone footage, and real-time social media updates. This allowed them to bypass traditional media filters and broadcast their message directly to a global audience, unfiltered and in real time. Hashtags trended worldwide, amplifying the visual and emotional impact of the march far beyond the streets of New York. This fusion of street protests and digital campaigning creates a multi-layered performance. The physical presence on the ground was multiplied exponentially by online visibility. It's a powerful model for modern resistance, where the streets and the screens work in perfect harmony to generate pressure. From a strategic point of view, this is a game changer, ensuring that even those who couldn't be there in person could still engage, share, and spread the demands. Another unique aspect is how the protesters positioned themselves not just against Netanyahu, but also against the perceived inaction of international institutions. The UN itself became a target of their critique. Demonstrators accused it of failing to uphold its own charter to protect civilians. This created a double-layered demand, holding both a national leader and global institutions accountable. This reflects a growing frustration with the status quo in international politics. The march wasn't just about Gaza. It became a referendum on the credibility of the UN and the rule of law in global affairs. By staging this during the General Assembly, demonstrators essentially asked the world, do these international bodies have the courage to enforce their own principles, even when powerful allies are involved? The protest's ability to capture media attention also reveals a very deliberate understanding of how narratives are shaped. Organizers made sure to have survivors, families of victims, and human rights lawyers present to speak in detail about the human cost of the conflict. This gave the protests both emotional resonance and technical credibility. The accusations of genocide weren't just vague slogans shouted into the air. They were backed by powerful testimonies, solid legal arguments, and documented evidence. This dual-approach emotional storytelling, paired with a technical, legal framing, made the protest's message accessible to everyone, from the average person to experts in international law. It also forced media outlets to report the event not just as a political spectacle, but as a serious and necessary discussion about accountability. On a deeper level, this march revealed how the war in Gaza has become a global symbol of resistance against impunity and double standards. For many of the demonstrators, this issue was bigger than Palestine. It was about a broader struggle for justice in a world where the powerful often seem to evade responsibility. The demand to arrest Netanyahu became a powerful shorthand for a larger call to end impunity for war crimes everywhere, making the protests resonate with audiences far beyond the immediate conflict zone. This universality of the message is a unique selling point, giving the protest a relevance that transcends national borders. The emotional power of the protest was truly amplified by the testimonies shared during the rallies. Survivors and relatives of those affected by the bombings in Gaza spoke directly to the crowd, transforming abstract political debates into raw, human stories of loss, suffering, and incredible resilience. This personal dimension ensured that the march was not just about geopolitics, it was about humanity. It gave the movement an emotional authenticity that statistics and reports alone could never convey. By weaving these personal narratives into the broader political and legal arguments, the protest became a compelling performance that touched hearts, while simultaneously demanding systemic change. As the march concluded, its impact lingered in the New York air. The chants echoed off the skyscrapers, the banners fluttered in the autumn wind, and the sheer presence of the crowd around the UN left a symbolic imprint on the global stage. While this protest may not lead to an immediate arrest, it absolutely succeeded in forcing this demand into the public discourse. It pressured leaders and starkly highlighted the gap between the values we claim to hold and the political actions that are actually taken. It was both a political act and a profound moral statement, crafted with precision, passion, and incredible strategic foresight. Its legacy will be its powerful ability to fuse emotion, law, politics, and performance into a unified act of resistance that will undoubtedly shape the debates for months, and perhaps years, to come. Thank you so much for watching. If this story resonated with you, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel for more in-depth content. We appreciate your support.